Why, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of the Rings. I'm your host and guide, Zollin Ironshield. And today, we're going to be covering, in detail, DPS Redline Guardian. Alright? So, let's just get right off the bat that Redline Guardians are not really totally in the meta for endgame content. But, this video aims to teach you why they're so hard to do, the reasons for that, and that there is legitimate reasons to use a Redline Guardian in a raid group or in a 6-man, and they can be good. It's just, there's a reason they're not meta. It's a lot of work to get to the level you need to be effective and helpful for a team. Okay, with gear and knowing how to do your skills and all that kind of stuff. So in this video, I hope to break it down. This is an advanced guide video. This is on my series of guide videos that I've been doing through the Lord of the Rings online for quite a while now, with class trait trees. Instead of just talking about a class in general, I'm talking about the trees in each class. So I have a really good tier 2 plus rating guide on taking with the Guardian with all the details. We are going to cover in this video the trait tree, the for the red line, what I use, what I recommend you use, places you can check out for information on that, what virtues I use, what my legendaries are, what skill rotations do you use, what ability combos do you use, what do you have to think about when you're fighting a boss versus adds, what legendary items and mastery I use on the legendary items, all that stuff. I'm going to cover all of that in this video, and we're going to go over it in details. So if it does sound good to you and you enjoy the video, don't forget to throw a like in there, and I will try to throw some timestamps on there as well. Timestamps, I deserve a like just for putting those things on there, because those things take forever. I joke, but they do. They take forever. It takes longer for me to do timestamps to record the video. So with that, my friends, here we go. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is why we need to premise this. Why does the DPS Guardian not in the meta for being a really like DPS character? Like, why do people like go, oh, DPS Guardian, right? There's a few reasons. I believe the DPS Guardian, you have to be at an extremely high level of gameplay with them to be effective. Okay? You have to know exactly what you're doing. You have to have the perfect gear, and even then, really, I don't think having more than one Guardian in a 6-man or a raid is good. There's a good bonus, by the way, to having one Redline Guardian in a 12-man group. Their buffs do cross raid buff everybody, which is fantastic. There's technically an argument for 2, but we're going to stick with 1 personally from all of my testing. Now, I've done a bunch of testing. I've spent many hours on this because I'm like, why aren't they that good? Now, I need to say right off the bat, there is a buff coming out right after this for the DPS Guardian for a few different things. One thing that I'll be talking about as I guide you to the abilities and how they all work, that's one thing we're going to talk about too, the abilities of the DPS Guardian. It's quite different than the Tank Guardian. We'll talk about that too in the video. One thing that's really important to note is that there are 4 different separate bleeds, that 4 different separate skills put on, and you have an ability that caches those bleeds out to give a damage buff on the target to everybody, including yourself, and it also does a bunch of damage. Now, here's the thing that's important to note. They're all different pictures. They're going to update that. So by the time you're watching this video, a month or 2 out into it, it should still be relevant, and I hope that all of my series here will all still be relevant at level 160 cap, which will be out in a few months too. I believe they will. If they're not, I will leave something in the description, and you can not, I'll be like, hey, I made a new video, or here's a small adjustment in the comments on something. I do my best to keep things updated. It's hard, but I do my best. But again, the Guardian, they're going to update it where the bleeds all are one image, which will be really nice because it'll be a little easier to keep track of when you have bleeds on. Another thing they're going to buff is the ability here called Protected by the Sword. They're going to buff this to give the whole raid, it's not just your fellowship, it's the raid, effect. Oh, sorry, excuse me. No, I think it might just be a fellowship. Oh, no, wait, I'm trying to remember. It says fellow members, which should be the fellowship, but I think I tested the other day and it affected the whole raid. So it might just be the fellowship for this buff. but it's irrelevant right now. It only gives a 3% bonus damage to effects applied to Fellowship within. Yes, I think it's the Fellowship only. But I think they're going to buff this up to 5%, and they're going to make it where it adds a parry and partial parry % chance to the whole group as well, which could be very helpful and handy in a DPS group in a raid. Okay. But I like it. They're giving the little buff. It should have been 5% in the first place. So another thing to finish up my little thing on why I think the meta with Guardians isn't really huge with DPS is because they really could use a little bit more buffs. They could do a little bit more damage. They just slight under par. You'd be surprised how much they do, though. I've been parsing testing, and I was very surprised to find out that my fully rated out Lore Master Redline, which I'm very good at doing damage with, only within a 2.5 minute span, he did 11 million, 0.4, and this guy did 7 with not full raid DPS gear, mind you, just some decent gear, but not full for DPSing. He did like 7.5. It was like just under, like, it was like 3 million less in the same time, and I was like, that's pretty good. Now, granted, you could argue, well, Zollin, the Lore Master sounds better still. Well, of course, Lore Master is one of the highest DPS in the game. But the thing is, if I had the full raid gear, would have been a lot closer. Would have probably been like 8 or 9. I probably would have only been like 1 million under the Lore Master, which is not really a massive difference in damage output, especially when I'm buffing the Lore Master's damage, because that's Guardians, they help buff the group's damage, and I'll explain that during the video. So there is some legitimate arguments to be had that they are decent. Lord of the Rings Online in general does a pretty good, they usually balance things based on the end game. Max gear, raid gear, all that stuff. There are some raid gear pieces the Guardian gets for DPS that are insane. Not only for crit, but they also give like a flat 5% to all your parry abilities, which are your main damage. And they give like another one's like another % bonus to your 1 damage buff. It's crazy. There's some crazy DPS gear. So I don't even have that. So I was testing without that. But again, when 160 comes around, I'll probably full gear out a DPS Guardian, and I'll give you a comment, maybe a little video connection when that is out in the future. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about a few things. Let's go ahead and first talk about the traits. Let's talk about virtues first. Let's go through virtues real fast. So what is the Guardian one? Oh, I didn't even say this. Items at the beginning. Items are important. What are your stats you're looking for as a DPS Guardian? Also, LOTRO, I love your pretty little flute, but let's turn that way down because it's too loud. You're looking for a few different stats. Might is the same as you were tanking. It's still extremely good for you as a Guardian. DPS as a red line. It gives you your physical master rating by a lot. It gives you crit rating. It gives you your mitigation still. Might is a fantastic thing. But, little fun facts. Agility is actually really, really good for the DPS Guardian as well. If you have an item like, for example, the Hunter's Ring, which gives Vitality, Agility, Crit, and that's all you got right there. This is very, very nice because it gives you, for every 1 point of agility, you get actually double. It's almost double. It's over double. It's over double of physical mastery rating, which is your outgoing physical damage, and it gives you over double your crit rating. Okay, where might, yes, it is 3 times physical mastery rating, and crit is only the flat amount though. So agility actually gives you more for crit. So as you're balancing your stats, your main things you're looking for as a DPS Guardian is you're naturally very durable. I would argue that the DPS Guardian is probably the tankiest DPS there is, naturally, just because they're naturally tanky with their other abilities they have when they're DPSing and other stats. But you're looking for getting your physical mastery rating up as high as you can. The cap for physical mastery rating is 2.5, or is it 3.5 thousand? I think it's 2.5. I'll link that in the description. And your crit it's usually soft capped, but you can get your crit pretty high up there. Finesse, whenever you're DPSing, you want tier 2, you're going to want about 70, 71,000. And as you go up tiers in combat, you're going to want to bump that up 80, 85,000. But I've got really good finesse here for tier 2-ish, for making sure I don't miss. And then, of course, you want your mitigations up. In Lord of the Rings Online, in the meta right now, at 150, and I'm sure this will be similar at 160, your mitigations need to be pretty high. So my tactical mit, a little low. But again, I'm a DPS. So, but it's a little low. I could probably get my tactical mid up. I do not have the perfect setup of gear to DPS here. Let me just point that out. I'm wearing some tank gear with this setup, okay? Some tank gear still. But I have really good physical mitigation. That's beautifully fine for a DPS. But again, heavies usually want 180 if they're tanking, 180,000. But if I'm DPSing, I could probably get by the 120-ish. That's probably fine, 130. Just depends if you're dying or not, right? But again, I've got my physical mastery rating up over 200% damage. My finesse is over 70, and my crit is 25% right now. And again, remember, I have some tank gear on. I am not wearing all DPS gear. My only really DPS gear is my 4 pieces of jewelry here on the left side. Okay? And of course, my weapon, my legendary weapon. So with that out of the way, those are kind of the stats you're looking for. Of course, will is great, but will is more of a tank stat. And you're really only putting will in as a guardian if you're tanking. That's in my tank video. But really you're looking for is might, vitality. Might is the big one. And then some agility is great to throw in. It gives you some good crit bonuses. All right? So there we go. And again, if I go through my gear, you can see I have like the Spirit Song weapon. It gives me crit, physical mastery rating, finesse. This is like the perfect item for a DPS guardian. I forget if the champions, do they get a bow? They do, right? I think this is good for the champion too. But this is a Guardian video, so we're going to stick with the Guardian. So yeah, but you can go through here and see a lot of things that have might on them. Some of this is tanking gear, but I put on some of the dragon gear because it gives physical mastery rating. It gives crit value, all that kind of stuff. This one gives crit and some tactical mastery defense. So awesome. There you go. There's gear. We're done with that. Next thing, trait tree panel. I'm so sorry. I try so hard not to like do a little burp thing in videos. I apologize when that happens. Sometimes when you talk a lot, it just like makes your lungs start like, you just got to take a deep breath, you know? So I apologize. But moving on, virtue panel. So for my DPS virtues, here's what I have right now. You can move this around if you want. I'm using wit. If you look at virtue, your virtue traits, if it's a sword, it's usually for damage. If it's a defense item, it's usually for defense. Now, here's one thing that I really recommend for DPS and tanks. Tolerance and fidelity are amazing. They gave you so much tactical mitigation, and right now my tactical mit is kind of low. So what I can do is I'd probably switch these two out for running something that I need to have a lot more tac mit, because that would right there give me another 18,000 tactical mitigation. And remember I told you it's a little bit low right now, so that would bump this up to 100,000. Then I'd be in a good spot with tac mit, even without adjusting my essences, okay? So that's one thing. But you can use a lot of different things for the DPS Guardian. Wit is a good one. It gives you physical mastery rating, tactical, which doesn't really matter. But, I mean, technically you do light damage. So technically you're doing a little bit of light damage. That helps a little bit. But really, the finesse is great. Helps you not miss. And a bunch of crit, too. So that's a good one. Determination is a great one. Just because it gives you 2,000 flat agility. And I explained already how that doubles for crit and gives you flat physical mastery rating. And it also gives you physical mastery rating on top of that. And it also gives you more crit. So that one's just a good one for DPS in general for the Guardian. Zeal gives you physical mastery rating, crit, and might. Those are all the things you want. So Zeal's a good one. Valor, physical mastery rating, finesse, crit. Oh my goodness, look at there. It's another one that's everything you want. Okay, so these are all good ones you can choose from. Confidence is crit, finesse, and some evade. And remember, when you're in Guardian two-hander, you actually do have the ability to block with a two-handed weapon. This is unusual, but it's a special thing for Guardians. I believe champions get it too, but again, I'm only saying that just a little side note. But not many classes can do that. It's a special thing in our tree. Mostly you always have to have a shield to block. Oh, that's the basic rule. You always have to have a weapon up to parry. If you get disarmed, you can't parry. Evade, you can always evade. That's just, everyone gets evade. But again, it's nice because it gives you some evade too there, 5,000 evade, which is not bad. 5,000 evade is like 0.5% chance, maybe 0.8. It's not great, but really what I'm looking at for this one is the crit, 12,000 crit. So anyway, those are the ones I'm using right now. Again, I would remove 2 of those to put in tolerance and fidelity if I really need to bump my tac mit up. So that's really up to you. You have to finagle your stats and what you want to sacrifice to get those mits up if you need them up. But there we go. There's virtues. So now we're going to jump on to the next thing. We're going to talk about the trait tree. Okay? Here we go. So the trait tree, you're going to be trading into the Keen Blade. This is the red line. This is what we're talking about today. Guardians have something pretty cool. They have Thrill of Battle. This ability increases your chance to score critical hits when using combat skills. Your successful damaging melee attacks, meaning you don't miss, increase your critical chance by 5% and stack up to 5 times. Scoring a critical hit resets the effect. So basically what this means is as you hit things, you get 5% chance to crit every time you hit. It stacks up to 5 times. And then if you crit, it resets that. But it always works all the time. So the Guardian has a very high chance to crit. It's kind of like how the Red Lore Master has the buff on its sweeping staff to get that extra crit damage too. Or the Runekeeper has some bonuses to get crit damage as well. The Guardian you can really bump up their crit chance. They can be critting like crazy. It's really awesome. Also, you have an ability that guarantees a crit, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But yeah, it's really awesome. Next thing, Broad Strokes. Sweeping Cut will affect additional targets and has a chance to apply bleeds. You want to put both points in this. You want to put 5 points to this for sure. This one over here, Heavy Weapon Training, plus 5% skill damage. And plus 5% two-handed weapon damage. I believe those stack, which means if you're DPSing with a Guardian, you should have a two-hander legendary item. For me as a dwarf, I'm using an axe because I get an extra 5% bonus on top of that. So in theory, I have 5% from the skill damage, 5% from the two-handed, and 5% from my passive as a dwarf with an axe. All right? That's a racial passive thing. Thrust. Put a point into this. You want to have this ability, you need to have it. It's one of your 4 bleed abilities. Remember, there's a core thing with bleed cashouts. I'm going to explain that in the skill rotations. You must have all the bleed stuff. That is thrust. That is broad strokes. You want this 2 points in this. You need to have those. The next thing you need to have is brutal assault. It gives you your brutal assault ability. We'll explain it in a moment. Put a point in that. Put a point in tireless blows. Parry responses have a chance to reset your brutal assault. This is good because brutal assault is one of your big damage dealing abilities. I will explain. Hemorrhaging. You want to put all 5 points into this. Brutal assault skill has a chance to apply your hemorrhages. 100% chance. Does more. Your bleeds do more damage. You want to put all 5 points into this. So far, you're pretty much all for all. As you go down from thrust, deeper wounds. This makes your deep wounds and terrible wounds pulse more and increases their damage. Put all 5 points into this. See this one? It says in vigorous response, your critical hits and parry response skills restore 1% of your max power. Forget this. Do not put any point in this. It's a complete waste of your time. You do not run out of power. Guardians just don't run out of power. Just don't do it. Don't waste your time. You literally have Catch Breath doesn't give you power in DPS, but Thrill of Danger gives you some power back, and you just won't run out of power. Just don't put points into that. It's a waste. To the King. This is one of your bread and butter abilities. I cannot tell you how awesome this is. I will shout out to Standing Stones. Standing Stones, please put the chance to make a fellowship maneuver back on this ability. That's another thing, by the way, I should have said at the beginning of the video when I was talking about why they're not really super meta. If the Guardians had the chance to open a fellowship maneuver with To the King again, it would definitely make them more meta too, with being a DPS. That should have never been removed. They made it where it was guaranteed in tank line, which is great during the update, but removing it from the damage tree made really no sense because it wasn't overpowered. It was just a chance to open one, and it was really needed. So we asked that you put that back, Standing Stones. That's just a request from me. Maybe in the future I'll leave a link if they update that. All right, into the fray. All 6 points. Some people recommend not putting points into this one. I do. The reason is when you put all 6 points in, you have a 100% chance to crit your next ability when you trigger it. It makes the charge duration longer and makes you faster. Normally, I'd say not worth it when you're DPSing. But the fact that you get a 100% chance on your next skill is extremely good, and I will explain why in a moment. All right. And again, I'm going to link something called LOTRO HQ. They have, it's for back from like level 110, but pretty much the trees are the same. It was after the Guardian update. So they have recommended builds. I'll link that there. You can check it out. Remember, learn this stuff to then break the rules. I always say this in my videos. My theory teacher in music always used to tell me this. Learn the rules, Zollin, then you can break them, right? So if you don't like something I'm doing, guys, change it. It's your choice. It's your character. But I recommend, personally, just starting off, I personally think Into the Fray, getting that 100% chance to crit is completely worth it. Next thing, going down here. Blind Rage. To the King has a chance to increase damage and attack speed. 100% chance when you have all points in it to increase your damage by 10% and increase your attack speed by 20%. Have to use this. This is not a negotiable one. Okay, there's going to be times I'm going to tell you, pick if you don't want it, like the charge. This is one you have to have. You will be, you're hamstringing yourself, no pun intended, if you are not using this. It's really important. This one, Warrior's Advantage. It gives you 10,000 physical master rating, melee crit chance 1%, parry, and a partial fate. Put 1 point in it. It's completely worth it. It'd be silly not to have that. Now, the other one is you hammer down. This is your other bread and butter ability. To the king, hammer down, and overwhelm, brutal assault. Those are kind of your bread and butter DPS abilities. Hard-hitting single target abilities, okay? So keep those in mind for now. Put a point in that, and also Rupture. You have to have Rupture. This is the one that gives your hammer down the ability to cash out bleeds. So a successful strike with hammer down. Now, if you miss, it doesn't work, basically is what it's saying. Now removes all active bleeds, dealing bonus damage for each bleed that is removed. Let me make very clear right now before I forget. The bleeds removed does not remove the entire duration of the damaged bleed. So in theory, if you have your bleeds on and then trigger the cash out before the bleeds run out of time, you'll still get the full damage either way. But what you can do is you cash it out early, just put your bleeds right back on. All right, I'll explain that in skill rotations in a minute. Additionally, for each bleed that is removed, increase the incoming damage on the target by 2% for 10 seconds. Now, right now it only does a total of 8%. It's supposed to be 10, and they're about to update that. So at the time of this video, it's going to be 8%, but later it's going to be a 10% bonus for the whole raid because it puts it on the target. And the best part is there's no cooldown on it, okay? There is a cooldown, but let me rephrase that. There's a cooldown on the ability. When you have the legendary stuff on it, the cooldown is 40 seconds. The effect lasts for 10 seconds, which means if you stack your bleeds, and I'm going to explain this in skill rotations in a minute, you stack your 4 bleeds and then trigger hammer down, that it will give that buff 8%, or it'll be 10 later, 10% for your whole rate of that target. That stacks on top of Oathbreakers, on top of, let's say a Blue Guardian does break ranks, that stacks on top of all the other burglar buffs that increase damage, like Enrage. It stacks on everything. It does not have a shared cooldown like Oathbreakers does with, like, the Mariners, we called Bodies, right? And the Lore Master's Raven thing that increases damage on a single target. This has its own thing, and the best part is there's no cooldown besides the 40 seconds. So in theory, you could have 2 Guardians, and they could be taking turns triggering that 10% damage every 20 seconds, right? Because the 40-second cooldown lasts for 10 seconds. So the Guardians could rotate to have 20. In theory, if we want to go real silly, if we had 4 DPS Guardians that were all insanely decked out, they could keep a 10% damage debuff on the boss at all times. It would be that would be very hard coordination and challenging. It's unrealistic. Really, you only want to have 1 Guardian, maybe 2 in a raid. When you start adding more, I feel like instead of it being a bonus to the group, it might start hindering the group because you could have other classes that add buffs or do more damage, slightly more damage. But again, the Guardian with full out raid gear can actually keep up in DPS to most of the other DPS classes. Maybe a little hair under, 5-10% less damage in total. That's why they just need a buff. Standing Stones, Gaurdian DPS just needs a little bit more buffs. Give us back our Fellowship maneuver with to the king, and maybe make the bleeds cash out a little stronger in some way, like it cashes out all the damage of the bleed duration or something too. It's not just a flat amount. So, that would be cool. But again, they're pretty fair on balancing things, the Standing Stones. I think a lot of people just don't really want to take the time to do what I did and spent hours figuring this out because it's a lot. So we'll get to that. Now they'll go into the Fighter of Shadow, which is an assist tree. It only costs 1 point to put every point into it. Here's what I pick. You can use the other one to check stuff out. I like having Force open. Now, in theory, when you're in DPS mode, you always, all the time... Oh, you know what? Before we go into the Fighter of Shadow, let's jump over to what the bonuses you get on the left side from being in the King thing. So we get Valorous Strength. This gives trait enhances your melee and crit damage. You get 10% more crit multiplier and 10% more damage. Sweet. Maybe LOTRO just needs to buff this. Make it 20% damage and 20% crit multiplier. I don't know, maybe that would help make the difference up with that little bit of damage. Bleed them dry. All Guardian bleeds have extended duration. All bleeds except Rupture have increased potency. It just buffs your bleeds, which also having extended duration helps because if you're trying to stack them up to cash them out with Hammer Down, good to know. Protection by the Sword. This ability, we already talked about it. It's an aura ability. In your Fellowship, if you parry or block an attack, the Guardian protecting you will be able to react. This is for anyone, and reflect light damage to the target. So basically, you give everyone, you're like almost like a paladin, I feel like, in D&D. You're like giving everyone this light shield. And then also everyone in range gains 3% damage in your Fellowship. It'll be 5% later. I just know they'll probably buff that as well, but they're going to give a parry buff there too pretty soon. So that'll be there too later on. Relentless Fury. This is one of your abilities. This is an amazing, powerful ability. We'll talk about it when we get to abilities. Brutal Charge. This makes your charge become Brutal Charge, increasing your melee damage for a short period of time. Will attempt to knock your opponent down. So that's another thing Brutal Charge does. It actually does increase your melee damage by 10% while it's up. And if you have the legendary buff to make it longer, and if you have Into the Fray, you're getting that 10% buff for 26.5%. That's a long time to have that. All right? And again, within 28.5% seconds, you have an automatically crit your first attack after initiating charge, which we'll talk about in the skill rotations in a minute. Heavy Blows. 5% melee damage, 10% crit multiplier. As you can see, they were trying to balance them to be closer to keeping up. But still, with damage parsing, they are a little bit low. But they're not as low as you might think. I think some people have a bad rap over Guardian Redline because, I will explain this more soon, but the Guardian Redline takes an extreme amount of expertise to be able to pull off and be effective, which I said at the beginning, but we'll go over that more in a minute. Prey on the Weak. Successfully attack against an opponent suffering from a bleed will inflict additional damage. So if they're bleeding, they're going to take more damage from you when you hit them. Cool. So it's good to always have bleeds on people. Let's jump back over the Fighter of Shadow. Force Open. It's just an ability that it's another ability you can use in there. You don't have to use this one if you don't want to. I like having the option, but you don't have to put a point in that if you don't want to. This one, Tenderize. You must use this. All 5 points. Basically, your parry and block skills have a chance to stack a crit bonus. So your crit will go up, which is really good. The next thing, let's just go down the line top to bottom here. The Singular Focus. This is why having one Guardian in your group is good for a raid or a 6-man. Scoring a critical hit with a single target skill will decrease the target's mitigations. They'll have 3% less armor and tactical. So mitigation, physical and tactical mitigation will be down 3%. This debuff cannot be refreshed by other traits. And this debuff stacks with the debuff from the Lore Master and from the Bjorning and from the other one, the Burglar. And also, I believe it'll stack from the Hunter's rework if they have something like this on the yellow line. Usually every class's ability of this particular one stacks. So, from my knowledge. All right. Oh, little side note. Call to Greatness. It's the Minstrel's ability to reset things. It will reset Hammer Down, and it'll also reset Cataclysmic Shout. Keep that in mind when you hear your raid leader say, hey, use CTG, right? Call to Greatness. Normally for the Guardian tank, it would be your Juggernaut and your Cataclysmic Shout if you have it. But for you as a DPS Guard, it's going to be Hammer Down and Cataclysmic Shout. It's usually the bottom skill. For the Guardian, it's pretty simple. It's all the bottom skills. Sometimes not the case with other classes. All right, War-chant. This is just an AoE taunt. Damage thing. Now, here's what's nice about this. It does some light damage. It's quick to cast. It also reduces your parry and block response skills cooldowns by 5 seconds when you cast it. That's great, because this chain right here, these skills, these are all parry skills. And these are some of your bread and butter damage abilities. Okay? So, good to use. Now, you might see I have these block abilities on here with the shield. You don't need to have these on the bar. I just have them there because it drives me crazy to have empty space. but you don't need to have those there because you're not going to be using a shield. So you can just remove those. And then if we go down here, there's Demoralizing Anthem. This increases the number of targets it hits, or chant, and increases the cooldown of block and parries. This is how you get your 5-second cooldown, by the way. You have to put the 5 points of this one. So you have to take War-chant, and you have to put all 5 points if you want that reset. Which is pretty nice sometimes, because these are all about 5 seconds. So if for some reason you have a couple of these on cooldown, it can reset them, which is nice. The next thing down here is Strong Bursts. Your area effect damage is increased by 20%. This is very good. Now, Guardians are ideally in DPS really good at fighting one target like a boss, but they actually have some pretty decent area of effect abilities between your Whirling Breach, your Sweeping Cuts, your Vexing Blow, War-chant, Cataclysmic Shout. Those are all AoE abilities, and you can spread those abilities. If we go back up to the top here to the next thing, Bastion of Light. Bastion of Light's a good one. There's one right here, Insult to Injury. Your damaging attacks have a chance to renew all debuffs on your target, and it gives the enemy a 30% attack duration debuff. This is great when your tank has like, I don't know, 10 adds on him, and you can make all those adds attack 30% slower, or the boss attack 30% slower. That's really huge. This is huge for raids. This is something that I think is overlooked by a lot of people with that's a huge debuff that you can apply on adds in the boss. 30% slower attack speed. That's crazy. Bastion of Light. This is your ability to turn on. We talked about it for tanks. And it has, if you put some points into Radiant, which I do, your damaging skills have a 20% chance to apply debuffs from one target to another, up to 3 affected by Bastion of Light. So basically, if Bastion of Light, all the adds are in there, and you do Sweeping Cuts to put bleeds or the debuff of 30%, you can, I don't think it transfers the bleeds, excuse me, but the 30% debuff, it can move it around to all the adds. If maybe you're not able to hit every single ad because there's like 15 of them or something, that's just a kind of little bread and butter. I only put 2 points into it because this one, Flash of Light, your Bastion of Light does damage. Why not? Well, you have it up. Why not do a little extra damage or DPS, right? I just put a point in it for that. You don't have to use that one. Warrior's Guile, yes, use it. It just gives you flat attack, evade, and crit defense. Parry, evade, it just gives you stats for 1 point. Really good stats, so take that. Light Touched. Some people only put a few points in this. I go ahead and do all 5 points. It makes your melee damage up by 2.5%, and this is the ability that allows you to block with a two-handed weapon. This is the special ability. It also, incoming healing modifier, you may block with two-handed weapon. It gives you some more incoming healing for your healer, so it's good. I just put all 4 points into it. Numb the Senses. This is the one that makes your cooldown faster on your removal, and also how many things you can remove off yourself at once. I put all 3 points. I think it's great. Defensive Expert. This increases your block and parry chance. You could put points into this since you technically can block when you're in two-hander. But if you're doing it right, you should not be tanking as a DPS. I know you're the tankiest, probably DPS out there as a Redline Guardian, but I don't think you should be putting points. It's a waste. That's for if you're tanking. You put those in. Bolster. Each stack increases your defense bolster mitigations. This is for tanking. You can't even do it without a shield. Blocking attacks. Well, I guess in theory you can block an attack with your weapon, but again, you're not being hit. You shouldn't be being hit. If you're being hit as a DPS, you're doing something wrong, your tank's doing something wrong, one of you is doing something wrong. So don't put points in that. It's a waste. All right, next thing. Go one more down here. Disabling Strike. Your potency of your non-damaging debuffs is increased. Your run speed debuff, your attack speed debuff. This is what actually upgrades your one up here from 20% to 30%. I said 30% off the bat, but it's 20% normally, the regular injury one. It also makes your stagger ability have a bigger slow. It makes them have a bigger mischance inside your Bastion of Light. That always gives mischance 5%, but it makes it 7.5%. And again, another thing that helps the raid tremendously, you drop a Bastion of Light while you're DPSing, and guess what? If your tank isn't a Guardian who already has Bastion of Light, now there's a 7.5% chance those adds and boss are not going to hit your tank or hit your friends, your other people that have the NPCs, the mobs on them. So I'm telling you, I think one DPS Guardian is really good in a raid group. I think it just matters at their competency. The person being that DPS Guardian. Do they know how to dish out the damage and make sure they keep their buffs up for the whole group? That's the big one. We're going to talk about it in this video. I'm going to teach you how. Okay, so you're going to be a competent Guardian DPS, okay? 2.5% reduction in critical defense. Again, there's some other bonuses it adds to. So put a point in that. It's totally worth it. Redirect. I only put 1 point in redirect. They recommend on the LOTRO wiki to put 5 points into this with DPS. You shouldn't be being hit. This only helps you. It makes you take 10% less damage from the target you do it on, and you reflect 10% of the damage back. Or it goes up to 30%, I believe it is, when you put these points into it, or 35 or something, 35%. You shouldn't be being hit. But I put it in there just to have as another damage. It does some decent damage. It's not great, but it's there. So I put 1 point in it. Thrill of Danger, throw a point into that. Then going down, Bring on the Pain. This buffs your Thrill of Danger. Allows you, when you're getting hit, you gain heals. There's actually some raid gear that gives you a stacking damage buff with Thrill of Danger. Again, if you have the raid gear on a DPS Guardian, if I had the raid gear for the stacking buff on Thrill of Danger and the buff that buffs my parry stuff, crit damage, and there's another thing that it buffs too for damage, yeah, that's when they're really, that's what LOTRO Standing Stones is focusing on, I'm sure, having that gear too. At least for the end game at 150. I'm sure that'll be similar for 160 as well. But yeah, it's still good to have. I don't see why not put the points into it. And if you are getting hit by some ads, you start getting healed for your max health, which is kind of cool. Protected by the Light. Enhances the skill protection by the shield and sword, which is the overtime thing I already talked about, and gives them the reflection damage, adds a damaged protection, and it makes them also get some more incoming healing on the blue line version. So it's a red line and blue line version. This will probably be updated with that update in a few weeks that I told you about. Be a little different later, but you can read it yourself later. Cataclysmic Shout, you must take this. Take the 1 point in this when you're DPS. I will explain in the damage rotation why this is so important. It automatically applies every single one of those debuffs to everything it hits. I can hit the 9 targets because I have something on my legendary that increases the target amount. I'll explain that in a minute. But it does a bunch of light damage, 22,000, and it automatically applies your run speed debuff, your attack duration, where they attack slower debuff to all of them. They all get the mischance for 1 second, but again, that's why you want to have Bash Them light up anyway. I don't know why you wouldn't have that up. That will keep it up constantly while it's up. The duration, they all do less damage. That's something I totally forgot, actually, to tell you guys at the beginning. War-chant makes things do less damage. So if you land War-chant on a bunch of targets, not only does it reset your parry skills, you're now reducing the damage of 12 targets, for me, because of my legendary thing, all doing 7.5% less damage. So you're buffing the boss, or whatever target, to make your team do more damage to it. You're buffing your fellowship's damage and giving them some buffs, parry stuff. You're reducing all of the ads or bosses' damage by 7.5%. You're making sure they all have a 7.5% chance to miss. And you're also giving them all a 30% attack reduction. Like, they're slower attacking. It's really good. There's some really good stuff the Guardian helps with in raids. So it also applies all 4 of your bleeds automatically. That's important for the bleed rotation. I'll explain that in just a second. All right, so there we go. That is the trait tree. We've talked about it, okay? Now, let's talk about skills very quickly. I'm going to try to go through them really fast. And then I'm going to talk about skill rotations, and then we'll talk about applying them to what single boss or an AoE group and what rotation I use depending on that, okay? This is how I set up my skills. You can set them out however you want. This is Dwarf Endurance. It's a racial ability. You might have that of your Dwarf. If not, don't worry about it. This is the portents thing. That's not a normal skill for this, so don't worry about it. But I got Thrill of Danger on. I got my Warrior's Heart there. I got my Ignore the Pain, right? That removes your debuffs on yourself. Your Catch a Breath. You can always use Catch a Breath by you can open this up automatically with Force Open. Ha! Force Opening. No pun, but so that's one reason I keep Force Open. If you don't get a parry response or something, because you're not being hit, hopefully. But remember, you do get a parry responses from your protection by the sword if your allies get that. Now, I would recommend the Guardian goes into there's two options. You could put the Guardian into the DPS group to give them the effect, but in theory, most of the debuffs and buffs the Guardian does for the team, he can be in the tank group. He doesn't have to be in the DPS group to really help the DPS group out. So that's up to the group they want. I have a thought that this ability goes across the whole raid. I thought it did, because I'm pretty sure. So it says Fellowship. We're going to test it real quick. 1 sec. Baruch Kazad. All right, so here we go. I brought an assistant. Zollin. I mean, my warden on my alt account here. All right, so right now he is getting the buff because he's in my group and it's a regular 6-man. I'm going to convert real quick to a raid. This is a really good guide video. I need to make sure that I'm telling you the right stuff here on this. So we're converted into a raid, so he is still getting the buff from me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move him into the other group real quick and just see if it does it or not. So let's bring up the raid panel and just move him into group number 2. And let's see, does he lose the buff or keep the buff? Let me turn it back on here. Then we'll know for sure. Still, remember, just because he's getting this from one group, it doesn't really... he is getting the protection. He is getting the damage buff. Okay. So, unless they change this in the other one, which I hope they don't, standing stones, please, it does indeed help the entire raid. So, I would recommend you put the Gaurdian DPS, unless you don't have another DPS, and you just want to put him in the DPS group because you want him to get buffs from whoever else is buffing the DPS group, like a red captain or something, right? Realistically, though, numbers-wise, if you have like a red lore master, red runekeeper, red minstrel, red captain, you know, and like a red or a yellow champion, and then maybe a hunter or some other kind of high DPS character, you might want them in their own group. The Guardian can go in the other group, and he'll still be giving the 3, it's going to be 5% later, or 5% buff to the whole raid, including the DPS group. This is why it's cool, too, to have a Guardian tank and a Guardian redline. Their shield and sword abilities both stack. They won't stack if it's the same ability, but if one's in tank and one's in DPS, they'll stack. So your one group is only getting the reflect damage as your fellowship group, which, by the way, means you have them in the group with, let's say, a tank captain or a tank guardian. That tank guardian or captain or Bjorning or whoever's tanking is reflecting light damage at the target, and you get his parry responses because he's the one tanking, which will open up more parry responses for you to be able to use, like your deep catch breath and stuff. So, sweet, cool, awesome. So yes, I was right with what I said. I shouldn't have doubted myself. I knew that. I knew I had checked it, but, you know, that's how it goes. So, again, one Guardian, DPS Guardian, that really knows what they're doing. Put them in the tank group, not the DPS group. They're giving all their buffs to the DPS group. All right? Now, they don't get any buffs from the captain, the red captain, except for, like, Oathies on the target, right? But they're doing the same thing. And, again, they can use Hammer Down and do that. It's going to be 10% later when they update it in a week or two. 10% extra damage every 30 seconds. They can have 10% damage for 10 seconds. And they can keep that on all the time. And they're also giving over 5% damage. So, and they do pretty good damage themselves, and they're debuffing the enemy by giving them mischance. They're giving them 30% slower attack speed. They're giving them... It's really good. Like, a Guardian, Redline Guardian is very, very good. So anyway, there we go. So now we know that for sure. I'm going to go ahead and let him leave my group now, because I don't need him to be in there right now. But he can stay here. That's fine. I'm trolling. So anyway, with that, that's a pretty cool ability. Moving on through the abilities, Let Fly. It's so you can pull things. It's a terrible ability. It's just your one arrow ability. Who cares? Bastion of Light, you already know kind of how that works. If you're a Guardian, this is more an advanced guide, so I'm assuming you know your abilities to an extent. But, you know, it's your AoE ability that drops the Bastion of Light. This is what will make the enemies take a 7.5% mischance while they're in it. And they will you'll also damage them, right? And then you can also use your War-chant to make them do less damage, that kind of stuff. Now, here's some of your bread and butter abilities for DPSing, all right? Relentless Fury. You reveal the weak fury of... You revel in the fury and the fray, channeling your martial skill and prowess in deadly attacks And basically what this does is it gives you 20% increased melee damage and 20% increased critical melee damage. Huge. Okay, 20 seconds. Any skill that based on a parry or block response, it's for 6 seconds, opens up automatically. And it's a 2-minute cooldown. Now, there's raid gear that buff these percents. I think up to like 25% each or 26% each or something. 27.5. I don't know the exact percent, but it buffs it, the raid gear. So if you get the buff for this one and you have the buff for Thrill of Danger, which actually, I'm trying to remember if that's different. Yeah, it's different gear because the Relentless one's on jewelry. The raid gear is the one that gives the Thrill of Danger scaling buff damage. You got a lot of damage buffs going on with the raid gear. Future. We'll see if it's the same at the 160 cap, but all this info should still work for you for the 160 cap. If it doesn't, look in the comments. I've got videos or additions. Brutal Charge. 71% run speed, 10% melee damage for 26.5% seconds with the legendary item and the stuff you put in the trait tree, the redline tree. Very, very good right there. But what really makes this skill strong is that 28.5 seconds after, any skill you use is guaranteed to crit. I recommend you use this on Hammer Down when you're cashing out your bleeds. The reason for that is, when you cash out your bleeds, they can crit the cash outs. They're a flat amount. It's 24 to 26,000 from what my gear has. It can change depending on your gear and your physical damage. But it cashes those out, all right? So when it cashes that out, it can crit. And it cashes all 4 of them out separately. So they all have a chance to crit normally when you cash out with Hammer Down, but Hammer Down also does more damage based on what you remove. So it has I have crit with Hammer Down for 235, almost 235,000 damage. And that, I don't know if that was a separate flat damage. It crit all the bleed cash outs for like 25, 26,000. So you're talking like 300,000 damage. Boom, like that, right? If it devastates. So, and it's guaranteed if you use your charge. So this is why this is really good, actually, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, the next thing is, let's jump to the bottom row here of skills first. Guardian's Ward, you could still occasionally trigger this. It gives you back a little bit of power if you're struggling on power. Another reason why I say don't put points for the power things, because you don't need it in Redline. You could just use Guardian's Ward, get 800 power back like that. I only have 6,500 power. If I can every 3 seconds get 800 power back, why would I ever would I waste points in this ability or use Thrill the Danger? Also gives me some power back, but there's literally 0 point to use this ability, at least in the meta right now. There's like no point. It increases your max power too. Like, why? Your Guardians don't run out of power anyway. But anyway, that's good to know. Sting, this is a very bread and butter ability. Just like it is when you're tanking, this is an extremely bread and butter ability for doing damage output. The reason for that is there's something that I have coined the term for my channel here, which I love to say, cancellation animation, right? Or animation cancellation. Say both ways, but animation cancellation. It's basically where you know your rotation so well that you know certain abilities will interrupt the animation of other abilities to make things go faster and do more damage. This is where the crucial learning and practicing will come in as you're trying to get better as a DPS Guardian. You need to practice, and I'm going to explain what are traps. Admiral Adbar, it's a trap! I'll explain what's a trap and what's good to be using, okay? Because there are abilities that are going to be a trap to you, you don't want to use. Vexing Blow, it's a trap! Don't use it a lot in DPS. It's a very slow animation. There's not much that cancels the animation, and it doesn't do very much damage. I mean, you're like, well, 15 and 20,000, that's pretty good. It is. The only time you're going to be using this ability is if you're fighting a bunch of ads. So, like, you have 15 ads your tank has. You're just trying to clear out the ads. That might not be bad to weave this in a few times, because it's some decent AoE damage, right? Sweeping Cut. This is a trick question. It's a trap, as in you shouldn't use this very often, but, because it will slow down your DPS tremendously. But you do have to weave this in, whether it's a single target or AoE, because it adds your bleed, one of the bleeds you need. So you have to weave it in for the cash out. And if you're fighting a bunch of ads, you're going to be wanting to use this one. It's going to be one of your bread and butter when you're taking on ads. But DPSing a tank, not a tank, a boss, you're going to really only want to put one occasionally down to get that bleed on there for the cash out. Okay? Otherwise, you'll be wasting your DPS. Stomp, it's your interrupt. Have it on. Right? I do not use the cooldown reduction for Stomp on my legendary thing for DPS. I use it in my tank because it's really good for when you're tanking. But realistically, your tank and other people are going to be interrupting. You're just going to be helping with interrupts. So there's really no point to put the cooldown on for the DPS version of the Guardian. It's a waste. I'll expend that in the legendary item at the end. Shield Blow, you don't even have this on your bar. Shield Sweep, Shield Bash, you're not going to be using in DPS. You can take these off. I don't even know why I have them on here. Just, again, it's to fill in because it bothers me to have empty slots sitting there. And they're in the same spot as when I'm tanking. So it kind of like mentally lets me see the flip. Another thing, Engage. This is a force taunt. You are rarely going to use this as a DPS. The only time that this would be like good for an emergency is if your tank gets killed by a one-shot and the boss is running for your healer and your healer is desperately trying to revive the tank with their induction on their revive. If you are really, really skilled and you see it coming, all right, this comes into your knowledge of the game, you can get your engage off taunt if you're right next to the boss and grab his aggro because it's a very fast animation and you'll force taunt him, right, for the duration is 5 seconds and also puts a slow on the boss, or most bosses can't be slowed. That's the problem with the slows. Most can't be slowed. But you can force taunt it off, and you are one of the tankiest DPS in the game. So you're the guy to be able to hold that boss for 3 seconds till the tank revives and jumps up and can cast his taunt back and retake the aggro back. So this is where this could come in handy. You could also say the same thing for Fray the Edge. Okay? Fray the Edge is also a force taunt, but it's ranged. It's only 25 meters when you're in DPS. It's not as far. But both of these, same thing, they're single target. You could do this with. You can combine this with casting your Thrill of Danger or your Warrior's Heart. You temporarily gain a big chunk of HP, and if you do that, maybe also throw on your Guardian's Ward, because it gives you some more parry and block chance. You're still really squishy, okay, compared to a regular tank Guardian when you're in red line. But you are not as squishy as other classes, right? Like classes. So you could save the day doing this little combo that I just explained. You know, throw in your taunts on, do Warrior's Heart, do Guardian's Ward, and just, you know, praying that your healer gets the tank up in time and that there's no lag and the tank can revive quickly and grab the aggro back before you die. But even if you did die, you might buy enough time for your tank to be back up and you might save the raid fight, right? Good thing to keep in mind. Here's another ability, Challenge. There's almost no time that you should be casting this, okay, as a DPS. You might just want to take it off your bar. But I don't recommend that because it's good to have the option. But you should not be challenging as a DPS Guardian. Hitting up to 11 targets for force taunting. Again, in a very, very small select situation where your tank dies and there's 4 ads, you could scream the ads off your healer while he tries to quickly revive the tank, and maybe you'll survive with your Warrior's Heart because you can get your health up to 450,000, which is a lot. So, now, in theory, you could sacrifice points in the trait tree and get down to putting in Guardian's Pledge for an emergency like that, but I don't think it's worth it. It's not worth sacrificing the points to do that. You could also put in to get Tactical Mitt over here on the blue line. You could also put in Tireless Defender, which, no, don't use that one. But you could also use Relentless Attack, which gives you more finesse, and your Sting has a chance to do parry responses. But the reason why this is a waste is that the blue line is not considered a help tree. It's considered its own tree, which means every point is 2, instead of the yellow being 1. So you're sacrificing a lot of points out of the yellow tree to put points in to get Guardian's Pledge. It's not worth it. But that's an option. But I'm just saying that so you can have that as an idea. You should be able to just... I'll tell you about something legendary item with Warrior's Heart that I do think you should get to help you be survivable. Okay? So, very rarely are you using your force taunts. Very situational. Turn the tables. This is your get out of jail free card stun, and it hits up to 7 targets around you for damage. And I believe it has a chance to stun those targets if they are stunnable. Ads or whatever. So, good. I would love it. It used to be if the target it hit would open a fellowship maneuver. Guaranteed. I'd love that back. But it didn't used to hit it didn't used to hit 7 targets. It was only 1 person. And it used to be only you had to be clicked on the target to turn the tables on them, even if you got stunned. That could be a pain sometimes. So the fact that you can use it in area effect means that you can always get up with it. But it's still kind of like disappointing that it also rarely hits because it's only 5 meters. So usually just gets you out of a stun or a daze or whatever. But the cooldown's pretty fast. 1 minute 15 seconds is pretty good actually. All right, so now let's go to this middle line. This is your bread and butter damage, and then I'm going to use some abilities and explain rotations. But let's just finish talking about these abilities real quick, okay? We have Breach, which is a bread and butter ability. It's very much like Sting. The animation is extremely fast. If you are doing a good job with your rotations, what I'll show in a minute, you can cycle through 4 or 5 abilities in like a second and a half. Like that, seriously. Like, I know that sounds silly, but I'll show you. It's crazy, okay? And then Whirling Breach, it can be a trap. If you're not fighting ads, this is great for fighting ads, but it does hit very hard. But you don't use it when you're DPSing a single target unless Breach is on cooldown. If it's on cooldown, you could use that to open up your abilities here, right? Because when you use this, you also don't need a target for this one because it's AoE. So this one you have to have a target or you can't use it. This one can automatically open up your ability to even use Catch a Breath. So in theory, you could use it to get Catch a Breath up real fast. But you can also use Force Opening to, even on a single target, to do that. Now, really, Whirling Retaliation actually hits harder than that, so maybe. Now, I think Whirling Retaliation actually has a longer animation that's harder to cancel than Force Open, but that could be argued. Next thing. Redirect. Rarely use this ability. Rarely. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be cycling between Thrust, which is one of your bleeds. And I'll talk about all the bleeds in just a minute, okay? Is one of your bleeds. And then you're going to be also using Overwhelm. I cannot repeat that enough. This ability does crazy amounts of damage. 38 to 51,000. It's a power of a skill that also creates a deep wound. So if the target already has the thrust bleed on it, it will add a new bleed. That is your 4th bleed. And then you have to reapply thrust to have all 4 bleeds. The other bleeds come from Sweeping Cut and Brutal Assault. So those are your 4 bleeds. So Brutal Assault, Sweeping Cuts, Thrust into an Overwhelm to upgrade it back into a Thrust. That's your 4 bleeds. And then you cash in that with Hammer Down. Okay? The next thing is To the King. To the King should always be used all the time. You can animation cancellation it all the time with different combos, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you can use Overwhelm and then straight into that, and it gives you the 20% faster attack speed. Negative 20% attack duration means you attack 20% faster. It's a little bit confusing, but that's what it means. And it gives you 10% more melee damage for 15 seconds. So you don't have to use it constantly, but it's still really good. This one will do a knockdown on a critical devastate. I really wanted to do, like I said at the beginning, have a chance to open up Fellowship Maneuvers again. That'd be really cool, but it's okay. Next thing, Stagger. Great ability to use, especially if you're behind the boss. If it's behind the boss, you'll do a debuff. Their attack duration is slowed by 25%. I believe this is different than the... I don't think that one stacks, though. That might be the one, actually. I'm trying to look here. Hold on. Oh, it's different. All right, well, keep that on the boss, 26 seconds. So if you're behind them and it triggers the 25% attack duration debuff and the 37.5% run speed debuff, doesn't usually work on bosses, but works on ads. And if it crits, it will automatically apply it, even if it's on the front of the boss. Okay? So it is positional ability. Don't use this that much. Its animation's kind of slow. It will slow down your DPS. Same thing with Force Open. Use it occasionally. Careful not to use it too much. It will slow down your DPS. But those are good skills, so they're still high damage. Brutal Assault, you're going to use pretty much off cooldown whenever you can weave it in. It adds up the biggest bleed you have besides the deep wound from Overwhelm. It's pretty good. So keep that one going all the time, and it resets on a crit. Remember, the chance, 50% chance for it to reset on a parry response crit or whatever. Overwhelm seems to crit a lot because when you do your timing, you remember how Guardian skills, they get more and more crit. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm sorry that this video is going a lot longer than I expected, but it's a really, this is a very it's more complex than I was anticipating with Gaurdian DPS when I was studying for it. Hammer Down. This is the one that does 2 different attacks, and it cashes out all 4 of your bleeds, and it makes the target take the 10% more damage, and that is, you can do it every time it's up, and it's a 40% cooldown. It does not share any cooldowns with Othies or anything like that, so it's just a flat bonus to your whole team on the raid boss all the time. Really good. And this is your big crit. All right, and then of course we already talked about War-chant's a big AoE. It reduces everyone's damage that gets hit. It also resets your parry response skills, your cooldown. Your parry response skill cooldown are these ones over here. Block are technically these ones, but it's the ones that are all grayed out here. So these ones right here, if I used them, this will reset their cooldown. Okay, and then Cataclysmic Shout we already talked about quite a bit, but it applies all your debuffs as with light damage. Also applies all 4 of the bleeds automatically, so you don't have to go through the whole chain. All right, now that we're done, we're going to talk about animation cancellation and the rotation you should be using depending on what you're using. We're going to talk about ads first, okay? So, as we're battling this guy, the first thing that you want to do when you're fighting ads, hold on, we're going to turn this down a wee bit with combat sounds. Okay. Oh, I know what's happening. We're hearing the other character. Turn him off. Okay. I was like, why am I hearing it so loud? That answers my question. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. First things first, get your breaching real quick, throw an overwhelm on any target, and get your To the King going. Now your attack speed's faster, okay? You can always weave in your improved sting and breach whenever you can, but you want to, when you're fighting a bunch of ads, you're going to want to do you can do a few things. If you want to knock all the ads down, you could immediately do a brutal assault, a brutal charge, okay? And you could turn on your Relentless Fury, and then you can turn on Whirling Breach, okay? And you'll immediately hit all of them and crit and knock them all down if they don't have knockdown immunity. You could also use Sweeping Cut. Technically, Sweeping Cut can hit more targets because it has a bonus in the trait tree. So you could use Sweeping Cut, and it'll make both the hits crit, both 2 hits. 12 and 13,000, but this one hits for up to 34,000, so it's technically a better AoE skill. So depends on how many targets there are. You want to knock down more, use Sweeping Cut. But you're going to be using Sweeping Cut on ads, Vexing Blow, and then use your War-chant on them, and make sure you have your Bastion of Light on. Make sure they're all missing. Make sure they're all doing less damage to your tank. And then you can even throw out your Cataclysmic Shout, right? And debuff them all and do a bunch of damage to all of them. But really, this is, that could be done early on, right? Your automatic crit will not affect War-chant and Cataclysmic Shout. I have tried it. It does not do anything. It also does not affect your auto attack. So when I trigger it, if I do this, did it use it up? Let me see. Oh, you know what? I take it back. I think it does use it. I'm sorry about that. I misspoke on that one. I didn't realize it did use that. It's any ability, right? Charge, burst speed, increases immune. The first target you attack will be knocked down for 5 seconds. Yeah, so I guess it does trigger the ability. So now we look up here real quick. We have Blind Rage on. Blind Rage, if you notice I attack slower, Blind Rage is from To the King. Okay, so we have 2 things up here. We have Blind Rage on, and we also have our Thrill of Battle, which is just a 10% increase, 5% increased crit chance, and it keeps going up until we crit, right? It goes up to a bunch until you get to 25% more crit chance, right? Yeah. So right now my crit chance with my stacks, because also if you look up here, I have Tenderize. Remember that was the thing we got in the tree? Gives me 27,000 crit rating. So my crit rating right now with my basic gear, it's not even the full raid gear for DPS, is 32%. And it's going up as I get, it can go up. That was 32 plus the 5. But in theory, I could get it over 50%. But by the time you stack up 2 or 3 of them, you usually crit anyway. So you're always getting crits off constantly as the DPS Guardian. That's really fun. Because at a certain point, you're just going to crit. Because you just like, your crits are just going up and up. So you'll notice I crit quite often. So if you watch the numbers over his head as I do damage to him, you'll notice I crit quite a bit. It's pretty crazy, actually, how often the Guardian crits. It's pretty awesome. So again, I'm sorry, I'm losing a little bit track of what I was saying. So we're talking about area of effect on targets. So again, have your Bastion of Light out, use War-chant on AoE targets. Whirling Retaliation is a great DPS for AoE targets, probably your best one. Sweeping Cut, just to get the bleeds on them, is great. And maybe an occasional Vexing Blow, but it's really slow animation, so it slows you down. Then just pick a target and do your regular damage rotations on it, okay? So, now it really shines, what comes out. We're going to talk about your bleed combos and your super combo to do lots of damage on a boss target, and when you're going to be cashing out the bleeds. So, you're going to be weaving this into your regular rotations. So, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about bleeds first, and then I'm going to talk about doing rotations. I'm going to just do stuff, and you can watch me as I do it, okay? And also, I could have blown this up for you a little bit. I said all the names. We went through all the things, though, so I'm just going to leave it how it is for now. So, you know what? I could blow it up a little bit. One second. All right. There. It's much bigger now. I could have done that while I was explaining the skills, but now at least you can see which ones I'm clicking, okay? All right, sweet. Good, good, good. All right, let's bring it back up. So now I'm going to talk about the bleed rotations. All right, real quick. So pretty much, again, your bread and butter is, again, Breach and Improved Sting are super fast abilities into an Overwhelm, okay? And get you to the King going. That's the first thing. Always when you start a fight. Get that fast, that buff up, because it's so strong. All right, next thing. You want to do a Thrust into a Sweeping Cut, into maybe like a Brutal Assault, however you want to do it. Now I can use another Overwhelm, that's going to get my 4th bleed stacked, into any of these other ones to get one more Thrust off. I have all 4 bleeds on. Now I'm going to trigger Brutal Charge and Hammer Down. Did you see that crit? Did you see that? Let's just look at how much damage that just did, just so you guys know how crazy this actually is, okay? All right, so what I just did with the automatic crit is Hammer Down crit for 158,000, okay, with the critical hit, and my secondary from Hammer Down did 39,000 because it hits twice technically. Hammer Down, and then you can see here with my bleeds, it crit 1 bleed cash out for 25, 25, 20, and I guess this one's 7 and 7. And that's a different one. Rupture Artery Snowman, 58,000. It does a lot. It does a lot of stuff. Rupture Artery is a bleed that applies after you execute the cash out. So it's a 5th bleed, but it just goes on for a little while. It does a lot of extra damage. You can see right here, because I Ruptured Artery, did 59,000 damage. So you can see here, I did a combo of like, what is that? It's like 350,000 damage with all these things all at once. That's one ability. That's why I recommend you always use Brutal Charge, because it guarantees all those cash outs crit, and your Hammer Down, which is a very powerful hitting ability, crits as well, including the bleed thing afterward, the hemorrhage that crits. Okay, it all works. With it 100% all like 5 of those attacks all at once. So it's really good. All right, so now another combo you can use immediately, all right, when you do this is, sorry that these little things are popping out here, but it's because I made them all bigger. So the next thing you can do here is we'll call it like the 4 combo or something, okay? Basically, it's you roar Cataclysmic Shout, all right? Turn on your Relentless Fury, because this increases your damage by 20%, your crits by 20%. You see where this is going? You trigger your Brutal Charge. You've automatically stacked those things, and you trigger Hammer Down. It's the beautiful 4, okay? That's the combo. To just instantly do your damage right off the bat, and to instantly trigger Hammer Down debuff for your team whenever you want and everything. So, let's just do it once here. Ready? So I'm going to, let's let it finish up the thing. I don't know why buff bar keeps turning on. That's so weird. So I'll figure that out later. Oh, it's because I'm going in and out of combat. Oh, that's why. Okay. That kind of makes sense. That's what it is. So I'm going to, again, get back in combat. All right. I'm going to trigger now let's just I want to double check something. Will this trigger my chance to crit? It does not. So Cataclysmic Shout will not trigger it. And then I use Relentless into boom, Hammer Down. Maybe it did trigger my crit. I'm gonna try that one more time. So you may want to use Cataclysmic Shout first, or Relentless Fury. Doesn't really matter the pattern, but use your Brutal Charge right before you use Hammer Down to guarantee you're using the crit on the Hammer Down ability and the cash outs. That's what I would recommend as a DPS. Okay, so it depends on how you want to lay these out. You could lay them out in a line if you wanted to. Now the thing is, the charge for the 100% crit chance and the 10% melee damage for 26 seconds, you should be using this off cooldown. And usually what I always try to do is when these aren't up, Relentless Fury and Cataclysmic Shout, I'm stacking the bleed combo that I showed you a minute ago, and I'm using charge into Hammer Down. Now charge is only a minute cooldown, so technically you could do Hammer Down more often. So you could do 2 Hammer Downs, 1 Hammer Down between each charge, automatic crit. That's up to you how you want to do that, or wait for it. Waiting 20 seconds though to use Hammer Down is, you want to be using as much as you can. So anyway, let me go ahead and show a combo here. So let's do the bleeds into this one. All right, we're gonna get my To the King going. All right, into this, into getting this bleed down, getting this bleed on with Brutal Assault. Oh, that's so frustrating. The training dummy, excuse me. The training dummy has despawned on us, and I'm not going to take an hour to edit out this one little 10-second moment. I'm sorry. All right, we'll do this again. All right, so boom, into this one, into To the King, throw down Brutal Assault, into this one, into that, into Overwhelm, into maybe Whirling Retaliation, and get Thrust back on. Boom, all 4 of my bleeds are on. Now I'm going to trigger Brutal Assault into Hammer Down. Boom, right? And if you notice, it actually does crit if 3% and the target is below 50% threshold. Oh, excuse me. Brutal Charge gives you a crit and I believe a knockdown. Yes, it does. I'm like, wait a second. It's supposed to do that. Brutal Assault will always stun the target if it's below 50% health, if it's stunnable for 3 seconds. But Brutal Charge will knock things down, which is why I was saying use it with AoE with adds that don't have immunity. Because if you use it with your first ability, whether that be Sweeping Cut or Vexing Blow or Whirling Retaliation on adds, you'll stun them all and knock them all down, which is kind of cool. But let's go ahead and look at the combat log one more time here after I did that massive crit combo. And we'll look at it here. Now, you can see here, I actually devastated with the Hammer Down ability. So, again, look at how many things that Brutal Assault, Brutal Charge, excuse me, worked with, okay? So it made, here's my cash outs for bleeds. Bleed 1, 2, 3, 4. You can notice it crit for 26, 20, almost 25, 26, 25, and almost 25. So that's just over 100,000 damage from the cash outs, from the 4 bleeds. Automatic crits. The basic attack crit for 39,000, because remember, Brutal Hammer Down does 2 abilities. And the other one, Devastated, that's just chance, but it was guaranteed to crit, for 200,000. So now we're talking that I did 240,000 damage, which is the skill itself. That's 350,000 with that one skill. And then it also crit the Rupture Artery, because I ruptured so many of the bleeds, for 60,000. Do you see why this is crazy? It's crazy damage. And you can do this every 40 seconds to a minute. Now, there's a chance you can crit this every 40 seconds without the automatic. But you can automatically do this once a minute. So once a minute, you can trigger out 100, 340, 400,000. That was 400,000 damage. Like that. Done. Boom. And you just buffed your whole team. The boss is taking 10% more damage now, and you just keep, and you reapply your bleeds, and you just keep going with your abilities. So, mind you, this combo I just did was without a 20% increased melee damage and a 20% increased crit damage, and without the raid gear. So in theory, if the Relentless Attack was on and I just did that, I could have just done, well, 20% more crit. I mean, that's like another 100,000 damage almost, right? Not quite, but math, because they're diminishing, right, a little bit. So you're getting close to 500,000 damage with one skill. Now, granted, you have to prep it with your bleeds, so it's not really one skill. But that's devastating that you could do that every 40 seconds or a minute guaranteed with the crit thing. That's crazy. Now, you can't do 500,000 every time. You could do 400,000 every time. But Relentless Fury you could do every 2 minutes, so that's not quite as often. But it does last 20 seconds, so you're doing more damage besides that super crit. You're doing stuff after with your DPS rotations. And then if you have the raid gear that increases Relentless Fury and increases your parry skill damage and gets you damage buff on Thrill of Danger stacking to buff this even more, do you see why this is kind of crazy? Like, in theory, as this being a combo one hit, it's the biggest hit in the game. The biggest direct one-skill hit in the game is the Runekeeper's Epic Conclusion. It can crit dramatically like this, like 350, 400,000 with really, really good raid gear. But they have to build up their atonement still, or attunement. I always say that wrong. But to do it. But this is really a lot of damage. And remember, guys, I have decent DPS stuff, but I've only got about half the DPS stuff. I don't have the raid jewelry for DPS, and I don't have the raid gear for DPS. So this is me doing an argument for that this is actually pretty good. Okay, so but now let me talk about why. Next thing we're going to talk about here, now that we've talked about the bleeds and the combos here, we're going to talk about your regular damage rotations in between doing the bleed combo that I just explained. This is where you're going to see a difference in Gaurdian DPS and why most Gaurdian DPS is probably looked down on and frowned on to an extent. I want to make that different and change a little bit. But in theory, guys, don't be unrealistic. If you're a DPS Gaurdian, a lot of the community is still probably not going to want to invite you to random things. They don't know who you are. It's going to be more challenging. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. I don't want anyone to like feel sad about it. That's just how it's going to be. Because they need to know you really know what you're doing. So you're going to have the right gear, and you're going to have to kind of grind with another character maybe to help get the raid gear for your DPS Gaurdian. Maybe you'll have to tank and be a good tank and use my tank guide if you need it to get the gear to get to the point where you can gear out a DPS Gaurdian too if you wanted to. But you're going to probably have to start with tank because everyone wants Gaurdian tanks. They're amazing. But DPS are a little bit more frowned on, but I don't think people are... No one's like outright mean about it. There might be some, but there's always some trolls in the world no matter what. But just keep in mind, this is why, okay? This next thing I'm about to say. I would argue that the DPS Gaurdian is one of the hardest DPS classes to play at a high level to know what you're doing with abilities. And that's... I know that's a big thing to say, and there are a lot of caveats to what I just said, so I wouldn't just take that with a, take it with a grain of salt. But my point is, though, to really be doing your DPS good, you need to be thinking about a few things, and I'm going to do my best to explain it right now to finish up the video here with DPS. So watch as I do rotations, okay? So I'm going to try to speak it, but I'm going to do them so fast I will not be able to keep up with my talking. Your focus is occasionally thrust, but you want to be using Overwhelm, To the King, Brutal Assault, occasionally Stagger, and your Hammer Down combo. Well, you're also keeping up an occasional War-chant and Bastion of Light, and throwing in a Sting. Every so often, you might want to do a Guardian's Ward, and maybe a Sweeping Cut for your bleed damage. But you're not going to be using a lot of other things. So watch. So we use Breach into this, Overwhelm, and if you notice, you'll watch, make sure you get your To the King buff, so it makes you faster. And then just start rotating, and if you notice, I am literally canceling certain animations. Did you see that timing on the one ability? I can't even say it fast enough. You're just going to have to watch what I'm clicking. Okay, I'm actually clicking it with my mouse so you can see what I'm clicking. Okay? Do you see the rotation and how fast I'm doing that? All right? Boom, boom, boom. Now, I'm a jumper. Some people hate that when people jump. I've always done that. I just like to jump when I crit. It's just fun. But as you can see, if you keep kind of rotate, you can get through a crazy amount, and you can always... Do you see me sneak into the King there at the end? You can sneak to the King in when it's grayed out. If you have it queued up... Did you see that? Did you see? You had it queued up in time. Also, I just got in a Guardian's Ward, if you noticed. This is something you're going to have to practice tremendously on a training dummy and see how fast you can get your combos up and making sure you're keeping a track of everything as you do it. Okay? So... I'm going to go ahead and try to get my bleed combo in. All right. This is what I'd be doing. Get in my thing here. I'm going to do Brutal Assault into this, into this. Toss in Overwatch that into... Do you notice how I just got abilities off that were gray? You can do that. You can literally cancel and watch. If you notice, did you see how fast I got in Sting in the other one? So watch this. Ready? 1,000. 3 abilities in 1 second. 190,000 crit, right there. So this is what you can be doing as you channel. Now, remember, I should also be throwing in Bastion of Light. I'm forgetting to do that. But, of course, if it's on a single target, you're fighting the boss, you still want to have it up. Unless you have a tank Guardian who has Bastion Light automatically up, there's really no point to have your Bastion Light up, then you can just ignore it. But otherwise, you should have it up to help your tank. So, I've got 3 of my bleeds on. All right. This one, throw in a sweeping cut. Now, remember, if you're going to slow down your DPS, okay? So, I'm going to wait 3 seconds for my automatic crit. All right, I'm going to do this into the automatic crit. Boom, right? Into another one. Occasionally, I throw in a... You want to be careful to throw in that other one. Now, if you have cooldowns, remember, you can always use your War Cry, and it'll reset the cooldowns on all of your 4 parry response skills. Basically, Overwhelm, To the King, and Thrust. You're not going to be using Redirect almost ever. You can throw it on there if you're taking a lot of damage from a single target, but it doesn't buff you from other damage, just from the boss's damage. So, but as you can see, right, I'm just like... You see how fast, how many abilities I just got in at that moment? Like, I hope you can see exactly what I'm doing here. So you could throw in an occasional Vexing Blow if you wanted to, but I think that Vexing Blow is going to slow down your DPS. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring up my damage chart here and just see what did we do here in damage. Okay, we're still in combat, but let's see. That was 3 minutes of doing damage. DPS. My DPS was 34,000. I did a 10,034,000 damage in that 3 minutes. Okay, because I got some extra there because of the stuff. It's pretty good damage considering I don't have the raid gear or the raid jewelry and half of my gear is tank gear. Okay? So again, my lore master in about 3 minutes, I can do about 12 million. He has a piece of the raid gear and he has the raid jewelry and he has all the best DPS jewelry. So it goes to show you that the Guardian is no slouch. They're pretty good, actually. They're pretty good. But again, it really, really, really comes down to something very specific. It matters that you're using your combos and that you're not wasting your damage by throwing out sweeping cut too often. This is something that I warned tank Guardians about too. If you're sweeping cut too often, it doesn't build up any aggro. And by the way, just side note, Vexing Blow does not build up aggro when you're in DPS form. It's your best aggro ability in tank. It takes that off. So you don't need to worry about that for using on AoE mobs. So keep that in mind. Everything is set up for DPS when you're DPSing. But it's really, really important. So again, watch. If I do Breach into Sting, into Thrust, into To the King, right? Then I'm going to do this one into Overwhelm. All right, I'm going to do Brutal Assault into a Sting Breach. Boom. Put this one back on. Sweeping Cut to get my last thing. Crit. Turn on Relentless. Boom. Do your massive damage. Then use that 20 seconds of extra damage to keep just bursting out as much damage. Throwing a Thrust on there. Remember, get your bleed back on there. Even if you're not going to cash it out, just throw in a occasional Sweeping Cut. And again, be careful using the other one. Stagger is actually a pretty fast cooldown. You can throw Stagger in a little bit more often. So if you have other things on cooldown, you notice I'm just making sure everything is being used. Especially Overwhelm should always be used. Brutal Assault should always be used. And To the King and Hammer Down when they're available. So now I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have my bleeds ready because Hammer Down's almost ready. So I'm going to go ahead and get all my bleeds and Hammer Down again. Boom. Straight into To the King. Boom, 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 boom. Occasional throw on your Guardian's Ward, just occasionally. Again, I did Vexing Blow. I should not have done Vexing Blow. That's slowing down my DPS. So be careful not to use the wrong skills. That is where the challenge comes in. As a real DPS Guardian, it's a lot more mind work than you think. I think that's the thing. Like, every class for DPS is a lot more work than people give them credit. Every class, there's a lot more things to think about. There's rotations, all that kind of stuff. If you notice here, he has the 30% debuff on him right now. And by the way, they do stack. They do. The 30% and the 25% attack duration. So I take it back on the tank. I can make the boss attack 55% slower. Now, I bet you it's not exactly 55%. I bet you it's diminishing returns. So it's probably lower than that. But still, that's crazy, guys. That's crazy. So the DPS Guardian, I hope that maybe I've changed a few minds on the DPS Guardian, but my goal of this video was not to convince you the DPS Guardian is the best thing on the planet. I'm not saying it's the best thing on the planet. What I'm saying is that it is viable to an extent, but you have to know your combos. You have to be doing your combo to do as much damage as possible on the target. Now you can see here, I've already done, what, 10 million damage on the snowman. And we'll check out the DPS thing in a moment. But look, I'm already like forgetting Bastion of Light. Make sure your Bastion of Light's on. You can always throw out your War-chant. Remember, it reduces the damage of everyone by another 7-something%. There's a lot of things that the DPS Guardian does to help your team, buffing your team and everything. Like, it's really, really good. So the moment this thing tells me I can't attack anymore, because the snowman usually does that, it glitches out after a moment, that's when we'll stop here. But I'm just going to keep doing it until that. Okay, there we go. We got the stop and the reset. Let's check out the DPS parsing, because that was 3 minutes. Just over 3, it was 3 minutes, okay? So, as you can see here again, I almost did 11 million damage, and my DPS, it's dropping, but my DPS was 50 because it keeps going the timer until I'm out of combat. It's annoying. My DPS was closer to 60,000. So 60,000 damage, or excuse me, no, that's per second. So it's, yeah, no, 60,000 damage a second. That's what it is, damage per second. As the longer the timer goes, the more it's destroying my DPS down. We'll forget that one. Mainly the focus on the fact that I did almost 11 million damage within 3 minutes. You can see here my hit chance, average. You can see my hit chance 32. My crits, I had, out of all of my hits, there were 329 regular hits. This is including the bleed damage, everything else. There was 169 crits, almost 33%, and 4% of them were devastates, or almost 4%, 18 of them. And remember, you always bump up the devastate chance when you 100% chance that the hammer down ability, right? Because if it's 100% chance, then you're just worrying about the crit. So if you hover crit real quick and you just look here, you can see there my devastate chance is a 7.5% chance. Okay. Now, could you bump this up by putting... There's technically some stuff on the legendary item you could do, I think, but probably not worth it. I'm going to explain legendary items now. So I pretty much talked you through the combos. It's not as hard as it seems, but if you are doing the wrong setup, you need to practice your DPS. You need to practice it on a target. Just practice it and practice it until you can get the animations and the cancellations, right? Or the animation cancellation, as I call it. All right, and again, see, look, if I do this one into Breach, Breach is a great one to cut out animation times, right? But then if I throw this on here, watch how many I can do right here. Ready? So ding, 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 boom, right? See how many things and if you do it right, you can get in, look at that, 3 skills, like 1 second, right? So you're always tossing in Breach and Sting because they're instantaneous. They get you so much more, it'll really bump up your damage if you're doing that. And then make sure you're always getting your Overwhelm whenever it's off cooldown. Because when it crits, I mean, that was 140,000 damage. And look at that. To the King, I just crit for 130 a second ago, right? So just keep it going. And remember, you can always do your combat Cataclysmic Stout in this one, into that. Boom! And they all crit. All like 6 of those abilities from Hammer Down. In theory, you could, if you used Hammer Down already, and you want to crit something, I recommend critting Overwhelm. If you want to use Brutal Charge because you're just trying to do as much damage as possible, or to the King. Those are the other good ones. Overwhelm has the highest flat per damage, so it'll have the highest chance to crit the hardest. So that's the one you really want to use in that. Brutal Assault, actually, as much as you want to be using it pretty often, it does not have the highest damage. Overwhelm's the highest, into To the King, all right? And then Brutal Assault is the highest, because it's what it does. Sorry, not Brutal Assault, Hammer Down. But Brutal Assault is one you should be using. And then throw in an occasional Stagger, throw in your Breach, throw in your Proof Sting. By the way, Whirlwind Breach does a lot of damage. If your other one is on cooldown, use it, right? If you have everything on cooldown, and you're like, oh, should I be using Whirling Breach because this one's on cooldown, right? Why not? Use it. Boom, do a spin. Jump. It looks really cool. You don't have to jump. But, it's one of my favorite things to jump with, though. Just looks cool. But yeah, you can really just chain your abilities. I mean, look at that. Did you see me just get 5 abilities in? That was 5 abilities in like what, a second and a half, 2 seconds, right? So you can dish out the damage. But the thing is, it again, like I've already said, and it's the last time I stress it, and then I'm going to legendary items. You have to get really good at it. If you're not doing it right, and you're not doing like the combos you can watch, I'm doing it over and over so you can kind of see. I have it muscle memory, like my animations that I can cancel and stuff. So I'm trying to show you the animations, and you can go straight into this one, into that, into boom. Did you see that? To the king, breach right into an overwhelm. To the king's back up, toss a sting in, toss this one in, toss another sting in. Baby Guardian's ward, this one, into this one, into this one, into overwhelm. Boom, 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 boom. You see that? So again, this is a nice little combo. Make sure you have this one on cooldown and up and ready. And then you can do this one, and then do breach, get it back up, and do to the king again. Do you see how you can like rotate the 3? Because these 2 trigger these 3, which trigger to the king. So you can like counter rotate. That's not the right term, but you know what I'm saying. See, like into that, into this, into a whirling breach, into a sting. See, whirling breach can glitch you out though, can slow you down. So you need to be careful how you put it in. All right, boom, 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 boom. Right, and then we're gonna do this. I should get all my bleeds on. I did that wrong. I crit with my swing instead of my... Did you see that? My hammer down? Should have crit with my hammer down. But it crit anyway because my crit chance is so freaking high on the Guardian because it stacks it. So if you get used to it, you'll get to the point where you kind of feel a crit coming too, because as it stacks up, you're getting closer to 50 and 55% crit chance. You usually crit within like 2 or 3 skills. So I usually notice I crit on like the 2nd or 3rd skill every single time. Not always, but usually. So you can kind of bet on, after doing a couple of your small ones like Sting and Breach, that the next big one you use, To the King Overwhelm, is probably gonna crit. Probably? Yep, see it crit. See, yep, there's the example right there. So that's the kind of stuff you have to think about as you're doing it. This is something you're gonna have to practice a lot. If you are lagging at all, it's going to hurt your DPS more than it would another class. That's just how it goes. It will. I mean, it's going to hurt everyone's DPS if you lag, but you really want to be using the animation cancellation and where it's gray and you get the ability off anyway. See that? See how I got To the King off even with it being gray? You need to be using that to your advantage. See, look, did it again. Do you see that? How I'm getting the ability off when it's gray? You'll have to practice it. You'll have to figure this out as you do it. Again, I'm trying to show you the best I can with my combos. But this is, again, you can see I rarely use anything but Sting and Breach to open up my other abilities. Okay? There we go. And if we look, how much damage did I do with that rotation? Well, I wasn't even thinking. Almost 11 million. About the same again. The DP... All right. Sweet. So, again, that's just... You just got to practice it. Get really, really good at it, because the bottom line is you will not be an effective DPS Guardian unless you know how to do your animation cancellations right and your rotations correctly, and that you're constantly... Now, I was talking to you, so I went a little bit brain zoning. I was just showing you the regular DPS rotation. I should have been weaving in my bleeds occasionally there and occasionally doing my combo with hammer down with all 4 of my bleeds, especially if you're in a raid. Because, and remember, it also increases your damage because you're increasing the targets, taking 10% more damage for 10 seconds for all of you hitting the target. Very important. And again, you want to be using Relentless Fury off cooldown if possible. You may want to wait a second or two to use it with your combo. Start it with your automatic crit combo cash out, and then use it with the rotation I was showing you just now over and over for the 20 seconds. It's good. It's good. And then again, don't forget, this also will reset your War-chant. And I just can't stress enough, the debuffs are amazing. You reduce the attack of one single target by 25, make him 25% slower, and you can stack a 30% on top of that. And the 30% you can easily stack to everybody. And by the way, your Bastion of Light can spread the 25 too, so all the ads will be attacking slower. They all have a 7.5% chance to miss. They all take 7.5% less damage from your War-chant. You're giving your whole entire raid 5% more damage. You're giving your one group your reflect damage. You're buffing the single target 10% damage for your whole entire team. They're good. They're very good. All right. Another thing to keep in mind that's really important is it's a legendary thing. It's the only thing. So we're going to talk about legendary items real fast to finish the video. I have talked about the boss, the ads, skill rotations, what makes it good, all that stuff. So you are an expert on that knowledge, the best I can provide to you in this video. If you want more info, you can let me know in the comments. But we're going to stop there, and to finish up, we're going to talk about legendary weapons. So for me as a dwarf, I'm using a battle axe because I get a 5% racial bonus. If you want to know where this is, you go into skills, you go into passives, and you go look around. It should be near the bottom. You know what? Excuse me. It's not in this. This is where you can see what bonuses you get for weapons and what weapons you can use. The Warden will have a bonus passive in here for spears. Most classes don't have that. So, excuse me, you do not go into that. You go into the same where you go to virtues and traits. It's the second one down, and you have to earn it by doing a certain thing. But as you can see here, dwarves get a 5% bonus to axe damage. This is something you need to think about whatever class you're playing. So if you were a human, you're going to be probably using a two-handed sword, because I believe they get it with swords and clubs, right? No, swords. I think it's swords, 5%. Hobbits, I believe you two-handed club, they get 5% damage. Elves get... Is it sword and spear? And bow? I'm not... Well, one of those things. I'm not going to say... I might be wrong, so... Again, I'll link something in the LOTRO wiki down there for you to check it out if you want to see. All right, let's go ahead and just talk about, real quick to finish up, the legendary item. So... I use a regular two-handed battle axe, legendary item for the Guardian. I went ahead and went with the Herald. You want a Herald that gives physical mastery rating, vitality, and might. That's the best one to use. I crafted the Herald of the Sturdy Ox. You could just get the regular Ox one, would be fine. Or you could even get the Lion one that gives more might than vitality. That would be a good one too. But I crafted this one because this one gives me the tactical buff if I have two of them. Mitigation buff. So I did that. Single target damage is a must. These are not legendary yet. Oh my gosh. I would do even more damage if I had these as legendary. So my damage would have probably been closer to 11 million. I would be getting pretty close to my Lore Master, actually. So that's kind of crazy. Not quite. My Lore Master should still beat him out because he's got better gear. And Lore Master should do slightly more. But it goes to show you the DPS Guardian is very close if you're doing it right. The problem is it's a lot easier to do it right as the Lore Master. You can still do it wrong. Every class you have the knowledge of the class. But it's easier to do DPS well on the Lore Master than it would be on the DPS Guardian. Because if you're doing anything wrong, you literally hurt yourself with animations being too slow. That's the trick. Where that is the case to an extent with Lore Masters and Rune Keepers, and there's some cool stuff in there too I'll talk about in the future. I do have a Lore Master Redline guide already. In the future I'll have a Rune Keeper Redline guide. I do have the Rune Keeper Healer guide already. So those are already there for rating and tier 2 stuff. But so single target damage, single target criticals, these are a must. You have to have these. There's two options, okay? That's not an option. Then I just go down the list. Brutal assault damage, it's one of your main damage, put it on there. Overwhelm and critical and damage and criticals, yes, you have to have that one. That's your bread and butter ability. To the king damage, yes, you have to have it. Stagger critical chance and duration, how long the debuff lasts and a higher chance to crit. I think it's worth it. I put it on there. Whirling retaliation damage. Yes, it does very high damage. Put it on there. Parry response damage. Yes, this is all of these parry skills. Overwhelm, to the king, thrust, and redirect. This is very good. Use it. Parry skill response skill damage. Very good. Don't think it's like a tank thing. This is a damage chain. So it's 40% more damage for all those abilities. So your legendary is usually like 30 to 45% of your stats in total. Have to have them good. Okay, now I'm using Heroic Alacrity. This actually increases your attack speed even more by 3% if you have two of them. I am, and it's giving me some finesse, which is great. Helps my finesse be higher. And again, remember, it stacks with your To the King, giving you a 20% reduction. So that's 23. Right? Sweet. Good. All right, there is the first item I'm using. Second item, same thing I already talked about the Herald, but in this case I'm using the same one because it gives me the bonus, because they're special crafted one that gives me a special bonus. Area effect targets, I really think you need it. If you're building to purely do damage to a single target or be tankier, you could sacrifice this one and put on more health, or you could put on bleed damage, some kind of bleed damage. Now here's the reason why I have area effect damage and crit instead of bleed pulse damage and crit pulse for bleeds. Your bleed damage is strong, but with my testing And since when you cash out the bleeds, they're a flat damage. They aren't a flat damage based on how much damage the bleed does over the duration. And when it cashes out, it does the same damage whether it's the beginning or the end of the bleeds. You should always have the bleeds on, even when you're not cashing them out, because that's extra damage. But it's going to be better, personally, I thought, for area of effect, just because your Whirling Retaliation with a single target still does a lot of damage. So even if it's on a boss, it's still doing a lot, buffing this. And you're buffing up your Sweeping Cut, your Vexing Blow, your Cataclysmic Shout, your War-chant. When you're clearing out ads, it's going to help still. I think it helps more than the bleed damage. I haven't tested it to put the bleed on it to see it might be better than the AoE ones. I'll leave that up to you, but those are my thoughts. I use the AoE ones. All right, this is the only tank one I use. Warrior's Heart Morale Heal and Maximum, okay? It's not the one that gives a bubble, okay? It just gives more healing. So it increases your max morale your maximum morale higher, and the heal is bigger. So if you are at half health and you trigger this, it's only 2-minute cooldown, you get a almost 176,000 heal. That was over half my HP. And it puts up my health temporarily for 20 seconds to 400,000 as a DPS. Okay? So if you get hit really hard and your healer's struggling to heal someone else, you can buy your healer some time. Or yourself, because you're a melee. Melees usually get hit more often in the front line. Okay? So that's one that I recommend. The one you can change things up and add other tank ones if you want, but I recommend that one. Next one, Sting Damage and Critical Chance. Yes. I weave that Sting in everything. Sting, Sting, Sting. And also, Bumblebee powers. Also, remember, it also removes corruptions, your Sting. So it's always good to be using on the boss anyway to help your team remove stuff. Vexing Blow damage. I don't have it fully upgraded yet with a gold one, but it's on there to help clear mobs. Sweeping Cut damage and crit chance. It's on there to help clear mobs and make those abilities just a little bit better for clearing ads. Okay? Catch a Breath. This I forgot. This is the other defensive one. I said there's two. There's two defensive ones. This one is really good because it helps you incoming healing. So your healer heals you more as a DPS. And your Catch a Breath is a faster cooldown. So you restore 10% of your max power, by the way, with Catch a Breath, too. Did I say that at the beginning? I think I might have missed that. So that's another way to get power, by the way, with DPS and Guardians Wards. That's why that other thing in the tree is terrible. Don't take it. I explained it 3 times at the beginning. Do not take this ability. This is not worth it. Okay? Not worth it. I feel like the Incredible Guy. Not worth it, Bob. Just kidding. Those are all people. Okay, anyway. Any Incredible fans out there? Anyway, so that's a good one. So I take Catch Breath, Cooldown, and Heal, and I take Warrior's Heart, Morale, and Heal Maximum. I didn't really sacrifice any damage abilities for those. Charge Duration, there's one I was picking between, but I went with Charge Duration because it makes the charge faster, and it just gives me a flat 600 Vitality. I didn't really have another good option, so I was like, well, I mean, it makes it last longer. So I was like, sure, why not, right? And also, I think the Charge Duration and it makes you faster. You move 71% faster instead of just the flat 60%. But also it makes it last longer, which means you keep the damage buff longer. I believe that helps that. Let's just double check. Yes. So it makes you keep your 10% damage buff for another almost 6 seconds. So totally worth it. This one's totally worth it. Because you're keeping that 10% damage from Brutal Charge longer. Alright? And then the end here, very important, Heroic Precision. Crit chance, crit chance. Just get 2 of them. Gives you more crit chance, and it gives you a flat 3% crit on top of everything else. And you know how good the Guardian is at stacking crit. It's probably the best class, actually, in the game. The fact that I have an ability that gives me a bunch of crit multipliers, bunch of crit damage, bunch of regular damage, bunch of attack duration direct reduction, and I'm stacking up. Not only can I get a lot of crit automatically, I have a crit thing that stacks to give me 2,700 crit on top of this number, so I'm already up to almost 200,000. I'm also getting something that gives me 5% crit, up to 25% on top of this. So I'm easily getting to 55% crit if I don't crit. If I crit, it resets it, and I start stacking that 5% again. But it doesn't reset Tenderize. Tenderize just stays on there as a buff. But it resets the Thrill of Battle. The stacking crit, which is a crazy ability. It's crazy good. So anyway, that is the Tank Guardian. It's so quiet in here. You can probably hear my AC unit. I'm sorry about that. But let's just turn a little music here to finish up. There we go. So anyway, my friends, legendary items, traits, virtues, skill rotations, boss versus ads, bleed combos, your full damage combos. Yeah, I think we covered it. That was the longest guide video I've done on a tree in a while. I'm sorry it was this long. I will put some timestamps in the description. I mean, I'm not sorry. I hope it helps you. That's the goal of this video. Yeah, it was a lot of work. I did a lot of stuff ahead of this. So if you would throw a like on there, maybe share the video with people. Subscribe, possibly. It's free. I'd really appreciate that. Also, I do this channel full time, so thank you to my Patrons. If you want to check that out and help me support in that way to keep making videos like this, I'd be grateful, but no obligations, of course. Please never feel obligated. You can join our Discord. We all help out there. Check it out. Patrons do some bonuses in Discord, but everybody's welcome to join Discord. VoiceOfTheRings.com down there. Go to the one that says main Voice of the Rings Discord. Thank you, Reb, Elrandor, and Angus. Stay tuned. I have more guides coming for more classes as I make sure that I know what I'm telling you guys. Because I spend hours testing things ahead of time. And I mean hours. I mean, there's probably 20 hours of testing work I put into this, and then probably another 50 hours of just playing. You know, more than that, actually. I've been playing the DPS Guardian since the game came out. But it's different, you know, since the last few expansions. Should be the same for 160, though. Fingers crossed. All right, Baruch Hazar Kuzar menu. Stay happy. Thank you, Reb, again, Reb, Elrandor, and Angus. And thank you guys for watching. I did it. All right. Stay tuned for more. Stay happy, my friends. Baruch Hazard, Kuzar menu. And again, I do other Lord of the Rings stuff on this channel, voiceovers, entertainment stuff. It's not just guides, but I love doing guides for LOTRO. But go check out all my other playlists. They're all organized and here on the homepage on YouTube. And thank you for watching. See you in the next one, guys. Thanks.